Hey, everybody, welcome into a Nichols Worth. I'm your host, Keaton Nichols. Surprise, surprise. At Keaton D. Nichols on the social medias. If you're watching right now on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube right now, my Instagram is in the bottom left corner in case you just forgot what I said, at Keaton D. Nichols. You can catch up with the show, anchor.fm/A Nichols Worth, the best place to do just that in case you're the kind of person that likes podcasts and that kind of thing. You can join us and catch up on all the news from the week in news, politics, pop culture, and sports. That's what we talk about here tonight and every night at 8. Throughout the show tonight, of course, you out there in the audience will also have an opportunity to chime in on the conversation as we talk about what's happening in news, politics, pop culture, sports, all that good stuff. You guys know the drill. So leave a comment or however you are listening right now, and I will do my best to put it on the screen and read it for you if you're on Instagram as well. Happy July 8th to everyone out there. Time is just flying, absolutely flying. Without further ado, let's get into some headlines for the day. That's why everyone's here, right? Talk about the news of the day, which is, of course, sponsored by Parkour Therapy. You can go to parkourtherapy.com for 10% off all athletic apparel using the promo code ANW2021. Once again, that's ANW2021. And without further ado, let's get to some of these headlines. Biggest headline of the day coming out of the Hill today. Trump files lawsuit against Facebook, Twitter, and Google, says the Hill. This is an interesting one for a number of reasons. There's a few things that are sort of happening here within the realm of this conversation that we have to sort of unpack before we get too deep into what's happening with this lawsuit. And the first thing to understand, and this is really the crowning sort of moment of all of this, was the January 6th insurrection, the riot, if you will, on Capitol Hill that left a few people dead, a few people injured as well. And it was this very public and embarrassing display of democracy, or it really wasn't democracy. It was really an assault on democracy at that point. January 6th is when this happens. I'm sure you all have heard of it out there as well. But that was a bad thing in terms of really Trump's image, or really the chances of him hoping to further his message beyond what he already did during his 4 years as president. The January 6th insurrection, of course, came at the end of a process that many people kind of knew was was kind of over from the beginning, right? Like Donald Trump had lost the election in 2020. And then there's all this rhetoric. There's all these, the election is fake, and, they're trying to steal something from you. We need to take this back. And then, it all culminates on January the 6th. It's the first important thing to happen here. Now, after that happens, of course, Trump is then banned from social media sites like Twitter, Facebook, etc., one at a time, one precious platform, if you will, at a time. And that was a big deal for Trump. I mean, think about it. I mean, we've been living in a Trump-free social media world, whatever that's worth to you, for, 6 months. We haven't seen the daily proliferation of tweets that are attacking people or that are supporting questionable political stances and things like that. We haven't had that in 6 months. And that's because, of course, the president was banned from these social media sites following this insurrection. First thing to keep in mind. The other thing is, at some point last week, the president's team, whatever that means. Can you imagine calling yourself a part of Donald Trump's team at this point? Anyway, they have quietly, as Politico puts it, launched a new social media platform on Thursday of last week, billing it as an alternative to big tech sites. Now, this might seem kind of obvious. Hey, look, I'm kicked off of all the ones that matter, right? I have driven myself out of the realm of favor with these social media sites. And I do say favor intentionally. We'll get to that in just a second. But anyway, the creation of this app does appear to be an attempt for Donald Trump to get back on the social media scene. If not Donald Trump, then certainly many of his supporters to get behind the idea. And then he jumps back on the website, or jumps onto this app. The app is called, by the way, Getter. It's called Gettr, Getter. It's supposed to be an amalgamation of the words get and together. Although, in my humble opinion, I think they could have done a little bit better on the amalgamation thing. But anyway, that's what they came up with. Getter, Gettr. Their mission statement says fighting cancel culture, promoting common sense, defending free speech, challenging social media monopolies, and creating a true marketplace of ideas. It sounds like a conservative kerfuffle, if you will, here going on. Everything that conservatives love about, attacking America in the name of Donald Trump is listed here. Fighting cancel culture is the first thing listed. Promoting common sense, right. Defending free speech. We'll get to that in just a second. I mean, these are all very conservative concepts. So we see a theme building here. Okay, so that's the second thing that we got to keep in mind when considering this situation. The third thing is, and this is important, that the Trump Organization CFO was just arrested last week on tax fraud charges and an ongoing investigation into Trump's misgivings. An investigation that doesn't have to rely upon the Senate or any other sort of governing body to determine the guilt of the person being prosecuted in this particular case. So those are three things that are happening here. Now we get the news today of the headline that you see at the bottom of the screen. For those on Instagram, Trump files lawsuit against Facebook, Twitter, and Google. It's a class action lawsuit against those three companies, as well as their CEOs, over allegations of censorship after the companies took action to ban and suspend his accounts. Again, after the January 6th insurrection, which isn't so easy to tie back to Donald Trump himself. The legal action comes after the former president was permanently banned from Twitter and suspended from Facebook for at least 2 years. I thought that was kind of odd, over posts made in response to the January 6th Capitol riot. Now, it's only a 2-year ban. I don't understand. Do you expect him to incite less of a riot 2 years from now? Like, I didn't really understand that. Might as well go all in, but let's keep digging, right? Legal experts who spoke to The Hill, just because articles coming from The Hill, of course, the legal experts described this case as frivolous, predicting that it will almost certainly be dismissed in court because private companies, and this is important, folks, private companies are not subject to comply with the First Amendment, which, as this article points out, it upends the basis of the complainant's argument. In other words, what Donald Trump is trying to assert here, that Facebook, Twitter, other social media sites, Google, they are censoring, they are limiting Donald Trump's First Amendment rights, and therefore they ought to be sued for that, right? But what the legal experts are saying is these are private companies. The whole amendment thing and the whole Constitution thing doesn't extend within the doors of a private company. If a private company decides, look, we want to say ridiculous things, or we want to allow people to say ridiculous things, it's totally up to them. But if they also say that we don't want to allow that, it's really up to them. If it's a private company, it's up to them. They don't have to follow the rules. And so the basis of this argument is done. The basis of this lawsuit is finished. It's never going to go anywhere. This is all for show. None of this will actually stick. So, the question then becomes, why this then? Why does Trump do this a lot? Actually, this is not the first time that he's done this. Why does he do this? Just throw out lawsuits just for the fun of it, right? Well, I think there's a few reasons why that he went to this strategy at this point, and it's important to understand that social media really was Trump's lifeblood in many ways. Like, when we heard shocking and game-changing information from the former president, it usually wasn't him standing in front of the presidential podium in front of a chorus or a gaggle of reporters who were asking him questions or having an opportunity to ask him questions. He certainly did that from time to time. But the real bombshells, the real juicy stuff, the real stuff that got him into the most trouble, the most controversial statements, everything came from his social media pages, namely his Twitter page, which had millions and millions of followers. And so Trump, without that, in the last 6 months, has had incredibly much less power I mean, that can't be taken away from this situation. Power is important to what Donald Trump's brand is. Power and influence, speaking directly to quote unquote people, especially conservatives, Republicans on that side, who already kind of don't trust government, and we're kind of looking for a good reason to trust a good old boy anyway. Social media was that direct connector that Donald Trump had to his people, and it was oftentimes, impossible to sort of stop the madness once it got started on the Twitter page. Since 6 months ago, he hasn't had access to that, which means his base of support, the people that almost elected him twice here in this country, they don't have that direct line to their leader anymore, to their at least spiritual leader or their thought leader, if you will. Donald Trump has been releasing, it's kind of funny, he's been releasing like statements and stuff, like just on stationery that says like Donald Trump at the top and things like that. And it'll say Donald Trump thinks that Nancy Pelosi is stupid. Signed, Donald Trump. That's how he's really been getting his work out, right? Like he has to release statements because he's not allowed on social media. It's 2021. It's how we live. So he has struggled in the last 6 months. He has struggled mightily to get that message out. So that's one problem with this. The other thing is, for Trump, he lives in a delusional world. I don't have to explain that to many people, but he lives in this delusional world, and within this delusional world then comes the possibility that he's going to be reinstated. Now, I know that sounds crazy, because it is. But that sounds crazy, but to Trump and his supporters, and we could go back to the timeline of ridiculous things that Trump and his supporters have believed over time. So the idea that his supporters would believe, with the right sort of movement and with the right sort of momentum, that he could be reinstated as president, whatever that means in American politics, to be reinstated doesn't exist, but whatever. If that's what his followers believe, then he could get some real momentum behind this. And it sounds like a joke, but he could. Remember, there were people who literally stormed the Capitol on January 6th. They didn't storm a government building in like Spokane, Washington. They were in Washington, D.C., the heart of it all, in front of everybody. They didn't really seem to care too much about what impact that had. So if we see that sort of rhetoric that goes from online, oftentimes these online social media posts and blogs and Hannity and the other one that's Tucker Carlson that's on there now, these sort of things that can easily be shared and spread on the internet and through social media, ain't happening. They ain't happening anymore. And if they did happen, we might be in a different country right now. That's how big and important this decision is on after January 6th for these social media companies to get rid of Trump. It might seem like it was a really good and important decision, but it happened too little, too late. The 2016 election, I stand by this. I continue to say this because I believe it to be true. In the 2016 election, that was a very close race. It ended up being a very close race, and there are a number of factors that you can attribute to that. But the impact that social media had and that the internet had on that race was immeasurable. Because we know that there were outside actors. They could have been Russian. They could have been all different types of things. There's actually a really good documentary on HBO that kind of goes into some of the hacking, if you will, of the 2016 election and what that phrase truly means when you talk about this election. It was through social media and the manipulation of social media that many of these actors were able to sort of disrupt the voting process in 2016. And I'm not saying that it caused Donald Trump to win, but whatever was supposed to happen without that interference, whatever was supposed to happen before that interference in the 2016 election, it didn't happen. Okay, whatever was supposed to happen didn't happen. And Donald Trump became president. Now, you can connect those ideas however you wish, but that was what I believe to be the single biggest factor. It wasn't that Hillary Clinton sucked or that Donald Trump was just, such a magnetic politician that, so many people liked him and everyone flooded to the polls. Were there elements of those two things? Sure. But for a generation that gets, over 70% of people who get their news now get it from social media sites and online sites and things like that, adults included, not just young people. You're telling me in an election where that kind of data is up for grabs, and that kind of information is out there, and that kind of an election where you have outside actors sort of interfering with that process, can we really say that it was fair or free, whatever? It's an argument for a different time. But either way, that interruption is a fact. It happened. We know it happened. We have documents that detail exactly what happened as well. So that's important. It's another lane that he doesn't have access to in this particular case. But it's also important to note that the media enabled that rise in popularity because they gave him attention. And these social media sites, in a sense, I know media and social media is different here, but social media sites, I think, had an opportunity to do this. They obviously did have the opportunity to do this at any point during the process. When you look back from January 6th, even before that, all the dangerous, sort of things that he was saying from his platform, whether or not he was a public figure or not, they were making up all these excuses as to why they cannot kick, or they would not rather kick Donald Trump off of these social media sites. All the way up to January 6th, when they saw a lot of the stuff that was going on the internet, just discussions that were going on in the internet, they saw that spilling out into real life. And then they were like, oh, man, bad. Right? Like this is bad. This guy has influence enough, at least, or can cause enough uproar from his platform and his position that real people in real lives are being affected. Because we saw it on January 6th. Now, the kicker is real lives were being affected before that. And many people were trying to tell these social media, you need to be able to limit or restrict or ban access for Donald Trump because he's a problem. Social media sites decided that Donald Trump, and regular media outlets decided that Donald Trump was good for business. Once a business that needs dollars and cents to survive, once they establish that bottom line of saying, look, well, I don't care what you do, just get it here, get the money here. Media executives, social media websites, things like that were seeing Trump as nothing but good for business. Eyes, videos, video views, clicks, listens, streams, all that stuff. Those are good for business. And that's what Donald Trump certainly was able to garner for these social media sites and these media sites. So the responsibility that they had of saying, you know what, we're not going to show his content because this is dangerous to, I don't know, maybe the whole democracy. That conversation wasn't had until it was much, much too late. Conservatives are riding the back of this movement too, by the way. This whole idea that Donald Trump is pushing this narrative that conservatives like him, even though he's not a conservative, it's a totally separate thing, right? But conservatives like him are being silenced by these social media giants. This lawsuit, as we mentioned earlier, will not work. But what it will do is it will stir up the attitudes of the people, right? If everything goes right for his people. This is going to stir up the attitudes of those people that feel like they have been silenced. They feel like they should be able to talk insurrection. They should be able to, force government officials to do what they want them to do, even if they have to bust into the building and make them do it face to face. There's a lot of danger surrounding all of this, but conservatives want a piece of it. Trump is doing this for Trump. Let's make no mistake here. He's not doing this for the conservative community or anything. I don't think he cares really too much about them or anyone else. He's doing this for himself, attempting to create a platform so that he can get back out there. But conservatives right on that with being silenced and being canceled, kind of popular themes that appeared in that mission statement of Getter. They all want to be a part of this too. And they're still dealing with that dance of, do we really ride with Trump and what he's got going on? Because we don't have to at this point. We could go do our thing. We could move on from Trump. But there's a lot of people who make the argument that, look, Trump was popular on that side of the ball. So maybe we ought to do more things that Trump would do, so to speak, to garner more support. So if anywhere in the last 4 years you thought to yourself, whatever's going on here politically is bad for business, not just for my side of politics, but for the entire country. If you ever had that thought and that idea, well, that era of politics is attempting to be reanimated, if you will. And it's not going to happen the same way that it happened the first time. Thankfully, we kind of have a roadmap for how that happened the first time. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen this time. But we are not so far removed from the last 4 years and the administration of the last 4 years that something like this couldn't creep back into the conversation again through these, sideline apps and things like that likely will fizzle out and likely won't happen. This lawsuit won't go anywhere, right? But the conversation sort of keeps going. And the Republican Party, the conservative party, if you will, then starts to blend and sound and look more and more like Trump's party. Even though Trump might not be directly involved with what's going on, the influence will cause a further shift on that side of the ball. That's not good, I would say. That's my estimation. So we'll keep an eye out on this. I think the pressure is certainly on Donald Trump to, I don't want to say perform, but the pressure's on Donald Trump right now because there's a lot of things that are moving in on him. The walls of the cave, if you will, are moving in, and all of this could just be a tremendous distraction from that. Let's try and pull the focus and pull the attention as far as we can away from this investigation. These criminal charges that could be coming, right? Could be. So we'll keep an eye on it. Let me know what you think in the comments section as well. We're taking all your comments and criticisms, all that other good stuff. 4 more years of Trump is something that is very real for a lot of people. A lot of people gearing up for 2024. But I think, all of this news today sometimes is a part of the Trump strategy to throw a bunch of information into the fire and hope that, people are kind of distracted by the 9 or 10 other things that might not be significant, and keep away from the 1 or 2 things that are. So we'll see. Anyway, we're going to get to a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about Noami Osaka, of course, in her Time magazine article today, where she said it's okay to not be okay. We'll talk about that. And a productive work week. I asked the question a little bit earlier on my social media. I'd like to ask people that are watching now, would you be more productive on a 4-day work week? Like if you had to do the same amount of work, but but you had 4 days that you went to work in a week instead of 5. Would you be more productive? Like, would you do better work? I don't know. Something to think about. Anyway, we're going to run a quick ad. When we get back, we'll talk more about those topics. Don't go anywhere. More of a Nichols Worth right after this.
And on my knees, I gotta pray. And every night on my knees, I gotta pray. And I pray my soul to keep me out the way. Pray my soul to keep me out the way. I've been thinking every night and on my knees I gotta pray. And I pray my Lord, my soul to keep me out the way. The streets been crazy lately and the devil like to play, and he just want me to live that lifestyle. We got killings everywhere.
Shout out to our sponsors, of course, Parkour Therapy, parkourtherapy.com. Before we get into the Noami Osaka news, Noami Osaka will be playing at the Olympics, as far as we know. Will be competing, rather, at the Olympics. This headline coming in today that spectators are officially banned from the Tokyo Olympic venues amid Japan's COVID-19. There you go. I had to read that. COVID-19 state of emergency. That means there won't be spectators. I just thought this was an interesting tidbit. Also, I still stand by that idea that I think that something's going down at the Olympics this year. There's a lot of energy, a lot of protest energy, if you will, and a spot and in a place where they're not really allowing a whole lot of protest and a whole lot of showmanship, and not showmanship, rather, they're not really allowing a lot of shows, rather, of support for these kinds of causes. So now that it's going to be a TV only event, does that mean, I don't know if that makes people, the athletes, rather, more motivated or less motivated to kind of do that kind of thing. We shall see. But I still say that something is going down at the Olympics, and it is not spectators, apparently. Let's get to the headline. Noami Osaka says it's okay not to be okay, in an article that she wrote for Time magazine. I thought this one was a pretty good topic to discuss because it involves mental health, which is becoming sort of a broad sort of topic to discuss, but one that's not so taboo anymore. And I do see a lot of athletes now, using their platforms to kind of speak up and speak out on the issues surrounding, mental health. And I think that that's a good look. A lot of people, especially young people, look up to athletes in some way, shape, or form. And not saying that they necessarily, imitate their behavior per se, but we try and see ourselves in athletes and entertainers and stars, in our society. And oftentimes when they step down from that pedestal and say, hey, I'm human in some way, shape, or form, they show that they're human as well. I think that does whatever platform or whatever subject that they're trying to bring light to on that platform. I think it does them a great service. So shout out to Naomi Osaka for commenting on this. It's not the easiest thing to talk about at all. Anyway, back to the article. Naomi Osaka in this article explains a situation that's been happening over the last couple of weeks. The French Open, she decided to initially back out of press conferences at the French Open. Naomi Osaka said, look, I don't want to get into it, but I just don't want to do the press conferences, right? And word got out that Naomi Osaka did not want to participate in press conferences there at the French Open, and it became a huge thing, right? It became a huge story. Eventually, Naomi Osaka pulls out of the event entirely herself, and that obviously became a big story as well. And it was ironic because, I think she wanted people to kind of leave her alone about the subject. She wanted rather them to ask less questions about what was going on, which kind of runs counter to what media personnel typically are used to. Like, that's all they do is ask questions. They're there to get, more answers. Anyway, she pulls out of the French Open, and, people kind of are diving into this. Why did you do it? She wrote this article and she said, basically, look, press are cool. This is what she says. The people of the press corps are cool. The reporters, the individuals that show up to these things, right? But the press conference process itself, she said, needs some reshifting and some reshaping because it doesn't always allow for athletes to have moments where they're allowed to not feel like themselves. Athletes, given these situations, aren't really in an environment where they're encouraged to put their own mental health above the presentation of whatever's going on in front of these press conferences. I mean, it's a pretty good piece. It's not very long. You can check it out on time right now. But like I said, I am glad that athletes are kind of taking that extra step to go out on a limb, I guess you could say, and talk about these issues. Athletes are celebrities in many cases, but not really by choice, right? Like they don't always go into it thinking to themselves, I am going to, as this athlete that could be a high performing and highly popular athlete, I am then going to have this responsibility of handling this newfound fame. Athletes are there to play the game. They're there to play the game. And we as spectators of sport, whatever sport that you're into, we like to watch these athletes play, and oftentimes the middle ground, the intermediary between us and the athletes are the press. They're the ones that get to be in the locker rooms. They're the ones that get to attend these press conferences and ask questions. Oftentimes the press at these press conferences, or the members of these press conferences, are thinking about questions that the everyday person might want to ask if they were in that room asking questions. I mean, that's just the media in general, but especially sports media. Sports is just entertainment. It's just games. It's just fun and games, right? And so nobody's dying over here. Nobody's, you're writing legislation that's going to change a neighborhood or anything. It's just sports. And we love sports. We want to be close to sports. We have social media. That's one way that we can stay close with the athletes. But the main way is through the media. And the people at these press conferences, they have a job to do. Right? Like they have a producer or they have, somebody above them who has said, look, I need you to go to the press conference and I need you to get sound, for Naomi Osaka. She set the play today, or maybe she just played today, and I need you to go get sound. Well, if you're a member of the media, that's all you're there to do. There's nothing a part of that process that allows for a human being in that situation to look at another human being and say, maybe now's not a good time. right? Because we all have those moments. We all have moments where we're like, you know what? I just can't right now. And athletes in that environment aren't always given that space to say, you know what, I'm good for now. And that's what Osaka was trying to do for the French Open, was just trying to say, you know what, I'm good for the press conferences. I don't want to do this. I have my reasons. I don't want to do it. And it became a big deal. It really did. Tennis officials don't want their stars, especially Naomi Osaka is one of their stars. They don't want their stars missing out on press conferences. Why? Because that's less press coverage about a popular player that then gets out to the rest of the world, us, the spectators of sport. And if we don't have as much to consume, if we don't have media content to consume from Naomi Osaka, there's less of a chance that we're going to pay attention to tennis. I know tennis fans probably will, but there's less of a chance we're going to engage with tennis content if those journalists, if those members of the press don't bring back that content. So that's the relationship that's going on here. And she's very clear to kind of outline that in the article. That it's not the fault of the people that are there. It's not like they're asking these pressing questions and creating an unfair standard. It's the process of everything. She says it's okay to not be okay. And if you were to, sort of extend this example out to other groups of people that might fall under this umbrella, maybe you're not an athlete out there, right? Maybe you're not a major athlete that has to face clicking cameras and videos and people sticking microphones in your face and asking you to comment about your performance at work that day. Maybe that's not your situation. But you might have a situation where, hey, people are asking you to do things and you're just in a space where you're saying, this is too much. This is absolutely too much, because you're a human being. And Naomi Osaka is a human being as well. We might see her on TV and see her in this particular role where we maybe have elevated her to something that's above or beyond a human being. Maybe not intentionally. Maybe we just kind of do it because we love tennis or we love the personalities that come out of this game. But we ought to listen to what Osaka is saying and give athletes a chance to be human beings as well. I appreciated Osaka for doing it. And she's just 23 years old as well. And this is, somewhat of an assisted transition into our next story as well. But, young people certainly... And I'm not just talking about millennials. I'm talking about everybody, right? I'm going all the way back now to Gen Z because they're facing some of these issues as well. But I think young people have a different mentality about what the world expects of them and what they expect from the world. I think the relationship that we as young people have recognized with other human beings is a lot different than our parents and grandparents. And that's okay, by the way. I'm not saying that as a point of contention or to compare generations in one way, shape, or form, but there is more of a focus today on things like a work-life balance. Making sure that your mental is okay, as well as your physical body. Because you can't do it all. I saw some posts a little bit earlier, that talking about burnout. Burnout is not cool. These people up here like 20, 25 hours a day, 8 days a week, that's it. I hustle, I do it. Cool, but we're not machines. We're human beings. This before we move on, the Osaka story reminded me a lot of Marshawn Lynch. It reminded me a lot of Marshawn Lynch. Like a couple of years ago, they eviscerated this guy because he didn't want to talk after, at press conferences. Marshawn Lynch is a good dude. Obviously, we see that now because after it was, found out that this guy really doesn't like to talk to members of the press in these press conferences, it became a thing. And then all these people became so interested in finding out what was really underneath the layers of Marshawn Lynch. I found it interesting. Marshawn actually had, quite an interesting come up after that, whole incident, where he was saying I'm just here so I don't get fined. He was giving one-word answers to long-form questions and things like that, basically because he kept getting penalized for not showing up to press conferences until eventually he was like, you know what, you guys want me to show up for press conferences? This is what you're going to get. You're going to get a shelled version of me here at these press conferences, and it's going to look worse than it is on me. People know who I am. But now, since you're forcing me to do this, it's going to look bad on you. It was a bad look all around. a part of the money scheme. Again, the NFL just wants more money, more exposure, more money. You know the process. But after that, like I said, Marshawn kind of became, really popular in other circles. He was on the Bear Grylls show, and he was on cooking shows and, daytime TV, all types of stuff. He even went back to the NFL and played another year. But too oftentimes, I think these are the athletes that come to the forefront. There are a lot of athletes who are dealing with these issues and struggling with these issues behind the scenes, and they're not, I don't want to say prepared, but they're not in a mood where they want to be in the limelight, and that should be okay. That should be okay as well. Dave McGowan comments in, says, example athletes like Russell Westbrook are dragged through the mud on paper because they have bad rep with the press. And I love Russell Westbrook. He's one of my favorite athletes, period, like across, all sports. One of my favorite athletes. And it's not necessarily because he's outspoken. I think, what I respect about Russell Westbrook is that I don't think he concerns himself too much with how he's going to come off to other media personnel. I think there's a certain, expectation of respect, if you will, that these players must give the media in a particular sense. And Russell Westbrook's one of those people who has challenged the idea that the media must know everything, and they must know everything now, and it must know everything with great and extreme detail. Challenging the notion that you're a bad guy or that you're a bad player if you don't, sort of snap to the demands of the press. Russell Westbrook's a great example of that. And I think, anyone that has experienced Russell Westbrook through the limited media exposure that we've had can see that he's a good dude. He's a good dude. And it's possibly the idea that he is not buddy-buddy and best friends with the media that results in silly things like, him having popcorn dumped on him, during the course of a game or something stupid like that. Just saying. It's a good point, though, about Westbrook. Let me know what you think in the comments section if you have something to add to it. Let's get to our last story of the day today. This one, I kept seeing this headline all around, so I wanted to ask everybody else about it and see how they felt. A study says Iceland's 4-day work week had, quote, overwhelming success. Overwhelming success. Let's figure out what this is all about. According to ABC News, or the affiliate that carried the story, productivity and services provided, quote, remained the same or improved on a 4-day work week. They're looking somewhere between a 35 and 36 hour work week. So I guess they consider that to be 4 days approximately. It's close enough, I guess. It also found that workers' well-being, quote, dramatically increased across a range of indicators from perceived stress and burnout. There's that word burnout again, to health and work-life balance. Some of those important key factors that I think our generation takes a little bit more seriously. So I'll ask you all this as well. I mean, do you think that you would be more productive if you had the same amount of work to do, but you had a 4-day work week, or you had a 30 to 35 hour work week, still got paid full time, still had the benefits and everything of a full-time job, you just worked less? I'm not talking about a per hour job that you're just not working those last few hours. I'm talking about a full-time guaranteed salary type of thing. But instead of showing up for work, having to show up for work for 5 days, 8 hours a day to do it, you only got to show up for 4 days, 8 hours a day. Or maybe you got to work all 5 days, but you only go to work for like 6 hours. According to Iceland, of course, the study went very well. They studied it from 2014 to 2019. And so they have 5 years of this data. So let's rack it up. I don't know. I feel like it would be quite popular here in the States. One of the comments that we got from Dave here, he says, I would not be more productive. And I'm glad I'm not the only one that feels this way. I don't think that I would be, a less than 40 hour work week would necessarily make me work any harder. It's hard for me to say. It really is hard for me to say, but I don't believe so. Like, I think it would kind of make me stress. Somebody had brought that up on my Instagram who had replied to that as well and said, I don't know. I feel like I'd be more stressed trying to meet the deadlines. That's how I would be. I'm a last minute type of guy. I'm a journalist. It's what we do. We do everything at the last second when it needs to be done. So I don't think that would work for me. But let me know what you think in the comments. I'll read them on tomorrow's show. The last show of the week, Friday, we'll be back talking more news, politics, and pop culture. Make sure you get in on the follow. Anchor.fm/a Nichols Worth is the best way you can catch up on the show. If you missed this show, you're just coming in at the end, you want to catch up on what we've been talking about this week, check out Anchor.fm/a Nichols Worth. You can, of course, donate to become a monthly subscriber of a Nichols Worth. If you go to Anchor.fm/a Nichols Worth as well. So it's great all around. It's a great time. All right. That's all the news and politics I got for today. We will be back tomorrow at 8 o'clock. I hope you will be with me as well to close out the week in news, politics, pop culture, and sports as well. Make sure you follow me on social media at Keaton D. Nichols. That's at Keaton D. Nichols, and you can catch the show and clips on Instagram a little bit later. All right, peace, everybody.